And welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected. Today we have a guest in the studio. Usually we do this on Zoom and we're Zooming live and recording live, but we decided to change the format a little bit today so you can see both of us at the same time in the same location. A lot of the people are wondering, where is Zoran broadcasting from? And this is the area, this is the environment. And I have a very special guest who made all the way to my hidden studio. And today we're going to be talking around the topic, which is really, really, really kind of interesting, And in preparation to this podcast, I was thinking that a lot of the times in the last few weeks, I was talking to people around the starseed activation. And the starseeds are the people who are advanced human beings who chose to live this life in service to others and who incarnated on this planet with a specific mission and purpose. And when I met Christian Jochnick for the first time, I immediately recognized that he is a starseed. Even before people knew what starseed was, I was like, wow, this guy, it's there with a mission. It's here with the purpose. It's bigger than himself. And I was just following his path in offering himself in service to humanity, which is really inspiring. When you choose sometimes that your life choices are not only about you, but they're about other people and how you can be the best possible member of community. How can you empower people? How can you get people to really be the best possible versions of themselves? And then also, how can you lead by example? What I love about Christian is that he led by example a lot. He was inspiring community that I live in the most beautiful way. He is venture investor. He is regenerative farmer and psychonaut. I mean, when I saw that in his site, I was like, what is psychonaut? We have to talk about that for a second. What is psychonaut? And he has passion of exploring how we can live better lives together with ourselves, with each other, and with Mother Nature, with nature. So Christian, welcome.
Thank you very much, Soren.
So psychonaut. What is psychonaut?
So psychonaut is a term that we like to use. People who use psychedelic substances to make an inner journey, and that journey, it feels like you go inside, but you could have just as well be in outer space, and you might have been in outer space, who knows? But you definitely open up a different. They talk about the doors of perception. You open up into something that is much bigger than the reality that we experience here, and then navigating that reality is what a psychonaut does.
I love that. This is a good term because you're becoming a new terminology for what we're doing right now in our lives, right? So this is one of the new, fresh things that I've never heard before, which I like. I love, and the audience would love it as well. So when I was giving introduction to starseeds, the phenomenon of the star, do you recognize yourself as a starseed?
Yeah, I think so. I've always, my whole life, I'm born with two privileges. One is the financial privilege of being born in a family with my father and his brother did very well in business, so they had a good financial background. But I also think that I was born with another privilege. I think Swedes in general, we were, by not participating in two world wars, I think we spared of a lot of post-traumatic stress, a lot of pain and suffering that many other European cultures suffered from. So I do think that especially the male Scandinavian Swedish side, my grandfather effectively broke the line. He was maybe not so successful in business. My great grandfather was very successful in business. My grandfather less successful in business, but he was, really connected to his heart and very loving and very engaging and very soft in his way of, like my grandmother would tell him, like, the kids have been naughty, go down and give them a smacking. And then like 1 hour later, she would hear them laughing and crying and, playing ping pong. And, he was really that type of person.
In the heart.
And my father, I grew up with my father. He was born 1940s, but very, he told me always, Christian, like, I only expect three things from you in life. Do what you want, be what you want. You want to be a journalist, you want to be an artist, you want to be a philosopher, you want to be doing nothing. It's okay, but follow your heart and do what your heart tells you to do. And then the only thing I ask from you is, if you say you're going to do something, do it. Because this is your word. And if you promise to someone that you're going to do something, then do it. And always do your best. Whatever you do, do your best. And these were really the only three things, and that gave me, and he really followed through with that. So I've always felt very free, to explore life and journey. And I've always felt safe and loved. But then early on in my childhood, I got in touch with a lot of classmates and friends, and I could see, the suffering, and we have a lot of suffering in our family as well. And this kind of like the human condition has always interested me. I've always become friends of the people that were bullied, but also the people that bully, because it's the same.
It's the same dynamics.
It's the same dynamics. So I from a very young age, I've really been interested in this and connecting with that, and realized that somehow I can sit with someone and listen to a horrible, tragic story and be really in the moment, taking all of it in, but I can also let go of it very quickly. It doesn't stay with me. It doesn't weigh me down. And somehow,
you are definitely a Starseed. Because the Starseed, they have a capacity to be empathic, and compassionate without absorbing everything, because they have advanced energetic skills of, transferring the energy back into the origin. So, if you can be present with somebody suffering, but you let go and you move on without that affecting you that much, then that's an advanced skill. So definitely one of these.
Yeah, and obviously I've done a lot of work on myself, trying to. When I was 16, I read this simple but brilliant little book called The Tao Pru about Taoism, and it just really gave me some very simple practical tools that I've implemented since then, and also teach me how to kind of disconnect my emotional states from what's happening around me, to really create this. What it's really about is cultivating this inner garden. This place, the outer garden, you can never affect the outer garden. The outer garden is the whole world and reality that we live in. And there's thousands and millions of different variables that constantly change, and you cannot control all of these variables, but you can cultivate your inner garden, and it's always a place that you can go to and you can find peace and calm, and that helps you deal with the outer garden.
So if you did not have, pain, I mean, everybody has pain, but if you didn't have that big challenge in your life, what inspired you to kind of get into the personal journey and cultivate your inner garden? And the reason why I'm asking is because in personal development industry, a lot of the people go through, tough times to wake up.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people have to experience some kind of dark night of the soul, or something that is really challenging them relationship-wise, financially, work-wise, and then there is an awakening as a result of that. So what was your entry point into the awakening and actually starting to work with yourself? Was it natural from the get-go, or you had a situation?
No, there was no big situation. I think it is partly is this maybe this guilt of privilege, feeling that I've got so much for free, so I need to make myself available for others. And then once you start to think about human suffering, then you start to reflect yourself, and then the process just starts by itself somehow. But no, there was no. I mean, it came later in life. I had a very difficult 10 years. My mother and my father separated, and my mother went through a very difficult period, and. But that was not in my formative years, actually.
Okay, so it's natural. It's something that you maintain as the knowledge. As you said, when you were younger, you already knew that you had to be in relationship with your inner garden. Right?
Yes, and I always kind of took an interest in this. I didn't shy away from complicated personalities. I got sucked in, and always, but even when I was young, when we were like, before we were 18, we had like fake IDs, and we went to these like the bars with all the alcoholics, and all my friends would sit and drink, but I would end up in a corner with an old alcoholic and listening to all their stories and I was always attracted somewhat to destructive behavior,
right.
A little bit intrigued by it, but also curious to understand it. Like, where does this destructive behavior come from, and what's the roots of it, and how can you help people to overcome them and to expand and to.
So human conditioning, in a way, was a topic of your curiosity, how we turn out to be who we are, and what are the behaviors that sometimes you can see in others, and that curiosity is there.
Yeah, and how can we overcome them and expand and grow and flourish. I love this term, flourishing. It's this term that has started to come up more and more, instead of talking about the problem, whether it's clinical depression or post-traumatic stress or insecurity or anxiety. So rather than talking about the challenges that we are facing, talking about the state that where we want to arrive at, where we are flourishing, and we're flourishing as physical body and our health, but also our mental state and our creativity and learning and developing and expanding our capacity to live and enjoy and to. So I love this term, flourishing.
And it really goes well with the coaching methodology, because in the personal development industry, we always put the emphasis onto the state that we want to achieve, right? Yes. Instead of giving energy to the problem, because by the notion of giving energy, the problem intensifies, because what you give your energy grows, right? Yes. So there's a shift in the mindset when you define the state. And then in that state, you give the energy, how do you really want to be, how do you want to feel, and who do you want to become?
Yes.
So the whole thing about flourishing and putting the emphasis of that is really, really important shift in the energetic perception of ourselves.
And I also do believe that this is what we really need our times now collectively. We have been quite aware of the direction we're heading in for quite some time now. And the data has been clear for quite some time now. And obviously we keep getting amazed by the speed and the scope of the negative impacts of our civilization on the environment. But I really think it's so important now that things are getting darker and things are getting scarier and things are becoming more imminent. We need to stay in the light, and we need to have the capacity and the courage and the energy to dream and to picture where we want to be, not just being scared or angry or frustrated at the state of how things are being. And this is our dear friend Amit. He always speaks about this. I love the way he says it's like the greatest force in the universe is attraction. It's the attraction of masculine and feminine, the plus and the minus that creates life. It's the process of evolution, and it all starts with attraction, not with fear. And this is really what I'm trying to do with myself, is to every day have a morning practice that brings me back, take out all my fears, all my anxiety, and bring in all the trust, so that I can believe in the future I want to see in this world, and to really stay in that place and to help manifest.
So in your regenerating or attending to your inner garden, so you mentioned already one practice. So every morning, what do you do?
So I started with something called 5 Tibetans, which was 5 things that you do in 21 repetitions. And then slowly I expanded from that. I brought in some yoga, I brought in some qigong, and then I brought in some meditation, and really trying to feel in my body what is it that I need. And now I have a process of about 20 minutes, which involves all of these things. And every practice is connected to the breath. So through these 20 minutes, really breathing slowly and in a constant rhythm to activate, the oxygen supply in the body. And then to finish off with the meditation, which I wish was longer and more focused. But 20
minutes is great. 20 minutes is fantastic. You live a busy life, and sometimes people always think, oh my God, these practices they have to take for a long time. In your format, 20 minutes is something that sets up your day, and it really benefits you. And I think it's important for audience also to understand what is the benefit in having this ritual.
Yeah, and I think for me, I went through about 1.5 years ago, me and my life partner, we decided to separate, and it really shook my whole world, and it's like a bomb goes off, and you have this sound in your ears, like, and the dust has not settled, and you don't know what's left and what's gone, because it affects every aspect of your life. And it's so easy to go into this state of fear, like, oh, what if we can't become friends? What if we can't collaborate around the kids? What if she wants to move? What if this happens? What if that happens? There's just an endless stream of things that could go wrong, and you just need to. And for me, it just really helped to every morning bring myself back to myself, make sure that I have a calm in the garden that I can rest into, and that I can, visualize, where I want us to be, and stay focused on the positivity and the optimism, so I can manifest that in our relationship. Because if you've been together for 12 years, it's because deep down you have a profound appreciation and love for each other, and you just always come back to that place, and through that shape your reality. But really to have that space every day where you can come back to yourself and visualize. I mean, there's a reason why every religion has an element of prayer, and the prayer is never about repeating all the things that scares you, but it's to pray for everything that you want to see for yourself and for your family and for your community and in the world. And I think it's hard to put your finger on it, like, how does this mechanism work? Ruben Sheldrake talks about morphic resonance,
and quantum field and quantum resonance and mega field.
But something, and I cannot put my finger on it, but I've seen it enough in my life that it really works. And we need to be so careful about every thought that we think, every word that we say, and stay focused on what we want to see in ourselves, in our community, in the world, and just keep repeating these as mantras to remind ourselves where we're heading.
So you see that the current affairs in the personal development industry, it's exactly where you are at, because a lot of the people are talking to the Starseed's core mission is to maintain the positive timeline. So there is always different timelines. It depends where your mind goes and where your emotion goes when your fear is guiding you. And people can sit down and create a very negative timelines based on the concerns, fears, and worries, and then give them energy by thinking about them repetitively, become obsessive about it, and then eventually what happens is they manifest, right? So what you're saying right now for all of us as a true Starseed, the emphasis is on maintaining the positive timeline. And you doing that by connecting to yourself, really clearing yourself up to your practices, and then keep on choosing that positive timeline and holding that absolute highest frequency, so to say.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Wonderful work. Wonderful. And now from there on, when you add service to yourself, because when you do these practices for yourself, you're actually serving yourself, you're tending to your inner garden. I also know that you have a passion to serving the community and serving the nature, so to say. So tell me a little bit more about your work with the community, and then specifically, let's focus on this buzzword of regeneration, rejuvenation, recreation of the nature, because I think some people know about it, but some people don't even know where this exists.
No, it's very inspiring, actually, what I've learned over the last 5 years. I had a profound experience in a ceremony which really brought me back to nature, brought me back into the forest. And I grew up in Sweden, so we play a lot in nature, we spend a lot of time in nature. So nature is a place I'm very comfortable with, but it's always been this place I go to, like I go into a house, or I go into a shopping mall, I go into the forest. And then in this ceremony, I realized, like, wow, the forest is, it's a community of living beings. Every tree, every bush, every plant has a spirit, and this has now been scientifically proven through some Canadian studies that managed to measure the connectivity between trees and bushes and plants through the root system, connected by mycelium, communicating with each other, transmitting nutrients to each other, collectively coordinating to fight disease. It's quite incredible. It is, the internet, basically, but we're transmitting ones and zeros and then transmitting nutrients. It's just so much more sophisticated. It's even hard to wrap your head around. But I was sitting there and I put my hands on the ground and I could really feel this connection. And it's like, wow, this is the life force, and this is what's inside of us, and this is what's inside of everything that is living. And this is where we are from. And this is what we depend on to live. This is what we need to be in service of in order to have a future. And there I kind of made a commitment in my heart that, this is what I need to do to be in service of nature. But I think, coming back of this question of community, I think it all starts with the inner journey. And I reflected on that becoming a father, like, okay, what is it really that I need to do as a parent? What do I teach them? What do I need to educate them on? And somehow it came to me very, very clearly. And that is the only thing you can do is to give unconditional love. Love in your actions, lots of touch, lots of hugs, lots of kisses, lots of physical love, especially in the first 2 years. In the first 5 years, lots of positive, unconditional love and affirmation, because you educate them about how to love themselves, and how to appreciate themselves. And once they start to appreciate and love themselves, they will start to pay attention on what's good for themselves. And then they will start to realize that what's good for them is when people around them are in a good place, because other people's state of being affects your state of being. And if you're going to live in harmony, the people around you need to be in harmony as well. And once you realize that we depend on nature to be flourishing, then you start to care. So everything starts with this. Once we start to put value on ourselves, but I do think that this is something that we don't speak about a lot. This notion of self-love from this perspective is really the seed of everything. And I do think that this is one of those things that you realize. For example, have ayahuasca ceremonies. A lot of people talk about the challenge of facing your fears, facing your anxieties, facing your traumas. Not a lot of people talk about the challenge of facing the light. When the light comes, it's often when we end up in the bucket because it's so overwhelming. And somehow it's so difficult for us to step into that light and be in that light and trust that light and believe that reality can be this beautiful and reality can be this abundant. And you know what? I deserve to be in there. We all deserve to be in this light, but somehow we don't feel worthy. We don't feel that we deserve it. We're scared that we get attached and then lose it. And all these kind of doubts starts coming in, and then we let go of it. And this happens in the ceremonies, but it happens in life all the time. You meet the person. No, she won't like me. There's no point. I don't want to. Oh no, they would never hire someone like. But if you just walk in there and you try it, and maybe it will work, or maybe it will not work. But if you decided that it's not going to work, it will definitely not going to work. So you won't even give it a shot. So this is just a little side note on that.
So the self-love, just before we go into that, what you realize is that the self-love, unconditional love towards yourself, is the essence. And kind of a anchoring point from where you can then begin to become in service to a community. Because the self, if you love yourself, then you realize that everybody around you needs to be in a good space. And then you are naturally willing to give service, right? And then you naturally love environment, and you love nature, and you understand the role of the nature. So it's important that anchor of self-love.
We need to have the capacity. If I don't even care about myself and my own well-being, how am I going to have the capacity to care about your well-being? First we need to care about our own well-being. And this was something that really came so strong in for me, which was the really such an opening portal for me was the work with ayahuasca, which really I think is, if we look at the Western civilization, what we've done is basically we broke the line to our ancestors, and the ancestors educate us. They help us when we're children. Our parents, our grandparents, they tell us like, yes, you could do this, but if you eat all your food today, you won't have any food for the rest of the winter. So you need to eat just the right amount so it can last all winter, and you need to make sure that there's enough food for everyone in the family, because otherwise you will eat all the food, and by mid-January we will be out of food, and then we will all starve. It's just like small things like that the elders teach us to learn teach us the boundaries, how to live in balance, how to live in harmony.
With nature.
But we broke that line.
Mm.
And I see the Western civilization is like a 16-year-old teenager, you know, and we have no support from our elders to give us these boundaries. And you can see how we really don't have this capacity of constraint and discipline. And we abuse work, we abuse sex, we abuse alcohol, we abuse food, we abuse freedom, we abuse power, we abuse everything. And the most sacred plant from the Amazon, the tobacco plant, it's not just a sacred plant. In the indigenous traditions, it's the most sacred plant. Look how we bastardize this beautiful gift, and what a terrible epidemic it's become in our societies. And the same with coca. They use it in the ancient communities to resolve conflict. They eat the coca leaves and then they speak and they listen because it helps them to mediate the conversation. And for us, take it through this to maximize the potent part of it. We take it through a horrible chemical process, then we roll it in one of the most disgusting things, the money bills, and then we snort it in the most contaminated place, the toilets.
It's inversion.
And ayahuasca somehow she's referred to as the grandmother. And I think when she arrives with this discipline, and the grandmother, all the other psychedelics somehow have become used in recreational context. LSD, mushroom, San Pedro, peyote, they're all used for recreational microdosing parties, this, that, and the other. But ayahuasca, no. Because ayahuasca is your grandmother, and she's going to take you where you need to see. And it can be scary, and it can be shocking, and it can be terrifying, and it can be beautiful. But she will guide you. And I think somehow through that experience, I've learned how to start paying attention to, what do I need in my life?
Right.
What is, and it's almost like a frequency. It's like, it's not a mental thing. I didn't start to think about it's just like, wait a minute. Every thought you think carry an energy. Every word that you say carry an energy. If you drink too much alcohol, you start shaking. When you scream and you shout and you're angry, you start shaking. And somehow in these ceremonies, I find that, the frequency becomes harmonized. And then when I go out in life, I can start to read through an energy, a feeling, what is good for me. And then I start paying attention to what is good for me. And through that, I haven't been drunk I can't remember when I was drunk the last time. And I'm from Sweden. I used to love to get drunk. And I stopped drinking Coca-Cola. And I started with these morning practices and small changes in our life that guides us in the right direction. And this is really what it's all about, that we start to pay attention. That we start to pay attention to the consequences of our actions and our behavior, the consequences on our own physical and mental well-being, consequence of our community, and most critically and most importantly, our consequences of our way of life on the source of our life, which is the natural ecosystem that we depend on. And this is where we kind of got lost somehow. We've lost community, and the container of coming together and supporting each other and holding space for each other to go through challenges in life, and we lost the appreciation that nature doesn't need us, we need nature. And everything that we do, everything that we consume, have a supply chain that starts, of course, in nature. Everything we have comes from nature, and what we need to do now is to follow these supply chains of everything that we consume back to the root, and then we need to look at what is the consequence of the ecosystem from this supply chain? And is it strengthening or is it weakening the ecosystems? And what I'm trying to do with the project here on Ibiza, and what we're trying to do with regenerative agriculture, is to go back to agricultural value chain and look at, the way we cultivate our lands in the last 50, 60 years leads to three outcomes. The first one is that every year we have less microorganisms, nutrients, and organic matter in our soils. And the consequence of that is that our soils cannot capture and hold the water that rains. So it just runs off and goes into the ocean. and it doesn't trickle down into our groundwater, which then we use
of course.
to feed ourselves and to feed our lands. And it reduces the green cover and the habitat for insect populations. And insect populations is the foundation of the ecosystem. So we're starting to see rapid decline in soil health, water levels, and most critically insect populations, which then leads to bird populations, which then leads to the whole ecosystem health. And when I started this journey, it was not, I hadn't read about regenerative agriculture and came to validate the assumptions. It was just an exploratory journey. But what I see now, 5 years in, which is so inspiring and so encouraging, is that number one, it works.
That's great.
And number two, there is a way, and the Amazon, it's now been proven, it's not an isolated occurrence. The Amazon is the greatest garden of mankind. It's been evolved through the relationship of indigenous communities that have created this abundance. And we can create this abundance. We can create almost anything we want if we just decide that this is what we're optimizing. Right now, we're optimizing for profit. Legally, you're bound by the fiduciary duties to maximize shareholder value, and the investors can sue you if you don't. So we are legally bound to maximize profit. But what we need is to maximize ecosystem health. And then profit needs to be a condition that we meet, because if we lose money every year, we lose energy every year. If we make money every year, we make energy every year, and we can pay salaries, and we can reinvest, and we can grow, and we can expand. But what we're solving for must be ecosystem health. And we can now see there are many, many examples of how you can improve the soil health. You can measure the soil, you can send it to a lab, they can give it to you black and white, they can upload it on a blockchain for everyone to see. You measure how much water you have and how much you retain in the soils, and you can measure insect populations and bird populations. And this to me is very inspiring. Large corporates and politicians typically don't respond to anything else than voter pressure and consumer pressure. Nobody's really in a meaningful way putting pressure on the corporates to go into regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
But the biggest companies of the world, Danone, Nestle, these kind of companies are already making firm commitments to regenerative supply chains now. And that is because they see the data and they know that it's inevitable. And this is the way forward. And it really is the difference between life and death, because the way we consume now, every meal that we eat, every product that we consume, we are depleting the source that feeds our life and our existence. And with the regenerative cycle, we are strengthening this source. And really, you have two products, they are identical, but one represents life and one represents death. And what's the premium of life over death? And this will become more clear.
So for the people who are inspired by this right now through your journey, how do we get on board with that? Let's talk about that specific. We talked about the inner journey. We understand what you do and how you do it, and cultivating in the garden. Now we can look into the outer garden, impact on the community and society and nature. So what are the practical steps that people can do from that perspective?
So there's a few very simple things. I mean, the first thing is really paying attention to yourself. Like, be kind to yourself and start doing this journey. Start taking care of your friends and family. These are very basic things. And then start to look for people that are growing locally.
Yeah.
Find them, get to know them, buy from them, support them, ask them if they need any help. This is a big step. I think already there, you will start to learn that there's so much more happening than what you thought. You might think that, oh no, but where I live, there's no organic farms, and I don't know where to buy, where to get it. But when you start looking, it's really happening. It's happening, and it's happening at a very rapid pace. And there are small things everyone can do in changing their ways. I think also something we can do is really to start consuming. less and start to try to be aware of what you buy and what you consume, and try to reduce the use of plastic, try to reduce the use of chemicals, and just try to reduce the volume of anything that you consume. That's a big part.
This is necessary, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, because you're part of the consumer is the mindset, and you want more assess, see what you need and what you don't need, really.
Yes, exactly. And then I think one thing I think is really wonderful is composting. To find a way to compost. It is really simple. There's an organization called makesoil.org. They're on Ibiza now. We're preparing a little community composting as a showcase. It's going to come out very soon. And, it's very simple stuff, and just separate your organic waste, put it in a little wooden box, fill with some, some mulch material, and just see it transform into soil, and then just throw it under your flowers in your garden. And this is a big step. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it really all starts with the inner work. And I think we cannot underestimate the value of every single small change that you make in your life makes a huge difference, way beyond the impact in your life. And I don't know how to explain it, but it's just so critically important that everyone start doing that and finding ways to enjoy themselves together with friends. I think what I've discovered also in this journey is, it never used to be agriculture and prayer and celebration. It used to just be life. You work the land because this is what you do to feed yourself and stay alive. And you didn't pray because you wanted a happy life and a happy wife or apologize for your sins. And you prayed for the conditions of the forces that you can't affect to be what they need to be in order to bring you the beauty and bounty that each season can offer you. And when the harvest came, we worked together, we harvest, and then we celebrated. But we celebrated the labor, we celebrated the community, we celebrated life, that we're gonna live another winter, and the energy that you get when you come together like that is incredible. But now the life we're living is agriculture is an industry, religion is an industry, and entertainment is an industry. And because entertainment has no context, no meaning, no purpose, we need to have spectacular shows with great choreographies, and we need to drink lots of alcohol and take lots of drugs, just feel something.
Yeah, just to feel something, exactly.
And I think one thing that, we do very well in this community here on Ibiza is that people make an effort to do nice things together. To really it's simple stuff. Just say hey, on Saturday, everyone, let's get together. Everyone cooks something. Everyone brings something. Bring your kids. Just being together. Small things like this helps us to restore this community well-being. And just doing something together where everyone feels that they're part of creating something nice. And you will see that just coming together with a few friends and the families and just eat some food, drink 2-3 glasses of wine is sometimes more rewarding than the best party or the best concert or the best celebration you've ever been to. It's this small little nurturing the garden of our lives.
Yeah, beautiful. Nurturing of the gardens of our lives. We're coming closer for the end of our podcast. We can talk forever. So how do you see the future if you're the keeper of the positive timeline? So let's say that is one of your core purposes, that you can see what's necessary right now to be done. And one of the things is rejuvenation of soil and us really getting in relationship with this, because we really need to honor Mother Earth and we need to sustain. I was at the Kogi's tribe teaching the other day, and they said, here in the business, what they said, there is a difference between how we live our life and how you live our life. And how we live our life is that we live with nature and you live off nature. They told us, you're like exactly what you said, you're like little spoiled children that are pulling the mommy all the time, give me, give me, give me. So
Yes.
you live off nature because you don't understand that nature is one of you and you need to be in relationship to live with.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying to us is also that we need to learn how to live with nature. And one of the pathways to that is being mindful, rejuvenating nature, composting, getting in relationship, consuming less, understanding the supply chain. What is really happening is beneficial to us, is taking away from the source of the depleting. So all of that is absolutely beautiful. I'm so grateful that you're doing all of that, inspiring a lot of people to be doing it. So what's future? How do you see the future if we kind of maintain this positive timeline? So let's forget about Doom City, because a lot of the people nowadays in different podcasts would inspire people to listen by conditioning them to become afraid of the possible bad future that might happen in order for people to do the good deeds, right? So sometimes if this is a conditioning, if you don't do this horrible thing will happen and then you're going to cease to exist. So if we leave this aside and we just focus on positive, so how do you see future if we maintain this positive timeline of our relationship when we live with ourselves and we live with nature?
So I think that the first thing, I'll just give you a little picture of, like, I have American family, we have relatives in America, and we regularly get on a Zoom, and all of us, and we talk, and our American side, we have, you know, liberals in Boston, and then we have conservatives in California. And, you know, we avoid all the political topics because we love each other and we just want to keep a good vibe. So it's very sweet. But at one point I came onto one of these Zooms and I started talking about what we're doing here, regenerative agriculture. And then Irene, who's my relative in California, is a full Trumper, and her and her husband patrols the border to Mexico and the whole package, you know, like all in MAGA. And then she was like, oh, wow, yes, I remember when I was young, and, you know, the fields were so green and there was animals and I saw this little farm and it looked so beautiful. And you know, this is what inspires me. Like, the regeneration movement is really a big tent movement that I think can inspire everyone. Because if we go deep, everybody have this appreciation for nature. Everybody loves to see a beautiful sunset or a sunrise. Everyone feels something when they see a beautiful flower, and if they're able to be present enough. And I think that the beauty of nature is what can attract us to do the right thing. And I think we need to create systems that make it fun and engaging and profitable and easy to do the right thing, you know?
Easy to do the right thing. I love it. Abundant and easy to do the right thing. Absolutely.
And I think for me, it's really about, you know, a big part of it is infrastructure. So what we're trying to do here is we need to go from large scale focused monoculture farms to small scale diversified regenerative farms, where we effectively, with the process is what the colleagues described, how we take. How do we give back? We feed the soil. We feed the soil, the soil feeds the plants, the plants feeds the animals feed us, or the plants feed us. This is the cycle.
Yes.
And if we respect this cycle and we feed the soil, then we're feeding ourselves and we're feeding the system that we are part of. So this is really, it's all about, soon we will launch something called the Soil Lovers Club. So once a month we get people together to talk about soil and regeneration. And this is what it's all about, like feeding the soil. And in order to feed the soil, we need to go back to this small scale, diversified farming system. And what we are piloting with our project here is, through our journey, we realized that if you do a diversified farm system, you need to do many different activities. Each activity comes with a set of knowledge, set of tools, and labor. And it can be very difficult in the first few years to do all of these activities, like composting, like seedling preparation, like harvesting correctly, storaging, processing, transformation. All of these things is quite difficult for a small startup farm to do. So what we need to do is, in a modern, powered by our technology and innovation, create this shared infrastructure that makes it much easier for people to start, access to good soil, access to good genetics, access to harvesting tools, storage, processing facilities, and all of this. And we are investing into one of these regenerative agri-parks here on the east side. And I really believe that this is a big part. It's an infrastructure system where, I think we will be able to service about 500 hectares. And I think, creating these hubs in rural communities all over Europe and the US will give a huge boost to this movement. And I think this is what's needed. And I hope over the next 5 years, we will be able to validate that with data and by demonstrating it. But I feel I feel it's the right way to go, and we need the infrastructure. We used to have it,
Yeah.
Back in the days, we had a shared meal, and I helped you harvest, you helped me, we helped our neighbors, and then we all brought it to the mill, and then we helped mill it, and then we all brought back. This is how it worked, and I think this is what we need to go back to. And then we need to go back to celebrating as local communities. And I think we need to remind ourselves, I think we need to have 4 points in the year. Something happens that we can't affect, which is the turn of the season. Mm-hmm. The seasons turn whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And each season can bring us beauty and bounty. Mm-hmm. And depending on the conditions of the forces that we can't affect, mm-hmm. we will get more or less beauty and bounty from each season. So this is a good time to pray. The seasons are turning. Let's pray for the conditions that we need in order to thrive. Mm-hmm. And let's include there, what do I need to thrive? And what do we collectively need to thrive? And set our intentions 4 times a year. I think that's a good way to connect, to remind us how humble we are in front of the greater forces that we can't affect, and to remind ourselves to set our intentions clearly about what we want to see in our lives, for ourselves, for each other, for the world. And then we need to celebrate as much as possible. Celebrate when the flowers come, yes. Celebrate when the food comes, yes. And come together, work together, celebrate together. I think everyone should, a lot of people knows how to play music, but they just forget about it because it's so easy to just put on Spotify. If you used to play guitar, buy a guitar and start playing again. Find people that want to play. And this is also something I love with the kind of neo-shamanic movement that have brought this old ways of just coming together in a circle with music and instrument and harmonize ourselves to sing. This is so beautiful and so meaningful and so rewarding. And if there are people in your community that do arts or crafts or music, support them, encourage them, engage with them. And this, I think, through a mycelium of small communities, we will start to see the transformation happening around us. And the last thing I want to just lead with is human beings, we understand what exponentiality is. Put it in an Excel sheet and we can extrapolate it, and we can look at the hockey stick and say, here's the inflection point, and then it goes into overdrive, but we cannot predict it. For every major technology that arrived in humanity, we overestimated in the short term and we underestimated in the long term. Mm-hmm. And what we've been doing is underestimating the destructive consequences of our existing systems. And now we have hit the inflection. And now it's becoming overwhelming because we could not see how devastating it could have been. Everyone knew that it was problematic, but now we realize, crap, we are really bad. But we are in another phase in the resistance, in the answer to this, which is the kind of ecosystem health-driven solutions. This is not something that started now. It started in the 60s, in the 70s. Rudolf Steiner has talked about this for years. Prince Charles and the Soil Association has been on this for a long time. The permaculture movement, it's not something we need to create from scratch. It's there, it's out there in all the communities, in all the countries in the Western world. There is communities, tap into it, follow it, support it, engage with it, because this is the way forward. And we are now approaching the inflection points. I think we're like 1 to 3 years away before we have the eureka moment where we will look around and say, wow, where did all this come from? And wow, look at it. I remember this land just a few years ago. It was just gray. And now it's all lush. And do you see how much butterflies is here? And oh, I see there's more birds. And I hear the birds now. A few years ago, maybe I didn't pay attention. Maybe they're not there. I don't know. But now I hear it. Now I see it. Now I feel it. And many, many, many little magical things like this is going to come. And we just need to make sure that we're present and aware to see it and feel it and take it in and let us fill us with hope instead of, because it's going to be a lot of things that can take us to a dark and fearful place. But I think we're going to see an explosion of inspiration coming in the future years. And you know, we made a lot of progress on renewable sources of energy, a lot of progress in recycling and packaging and you know, all kinds of technologies that can help us move in the right direction. And they have all happened, and it's impossible to get a grasp of the impact of it because it's all happening distributed all over the world in different pockets. And soon it will all start to kind of blend together into an ecosystem, and we will start to see the kind of synergies between all these initiatives that have been kind of emerging and maturing. And we're going to see an explosion. We're going to have a few rough years, and then we're going to have, you know, like a sprint into the light, and hopefully we'll have enough speed and enough inspiration to reach there.
So we will have enough speed to get into the light. I hope this was really, really inspiring to you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for coming and doing this face-to-face with me. Enjoy listening. We'll talk next week on the TNM Coaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected. Thank you so much, and bye for now.